Good afternoon, everybody. We're glad that you're with us. This is General Policy Committee of the Gainesville City Commission, March 25th, 2021, and we are going to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, first order of business.
First order of business is the adoption of the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Is there a second? Was that you, Commissioner? Okay. Madam Clerk, the motion was made by Commissioner Ward, seconded by Commissioner Arreola to adopt our agenda. Just for those in the public watching, our first item, besides the minutes, will be a discussion and update on the U.S. Job Corps property, then a discussion of the general fund transfer, and then finally a presentation of our city plan board as to their work that they've been doing. Is there any public comment? Who do we have with us? Adam? Yeah, Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for having me again. We do have one commenter on the agenda this afternoon, Mr. Nathan Scott. Mr. Scott, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, Mayor Poe, Commissioners, Nathan Scott. So with all due respect, I respectfully request the Gainesville City Commission to add public comment as it does for many of its other meetings back to the General Policy Committee agenda. It's been missing since the totalitarianism of COVID, and it's far time, Mayor Poe, that public comment get added back to that. It's a unique opportunity for your constituents to address issues that may be of interest to the General Policy Committee. In the same manner, it's, is done at the normal city commission meetings and every other committee. So this is the rare oddity where it's not on the agenda. It was previously on agendas. It was previously allowed and on meetings pre-COVID totalitarianism. So again, any assertion to the contrary, Mayor Poe, that you've made in the past in response to this specific comment is false and disproven by video evidence of prior meetings. So again, it's not to be disruptive. It's a reasonable ask in the furtherance of good governance. You guys should seek to do that, whether it be adopted today or adopted on the next meeting. It is a typographical error, and I've brought this to the Commission's attention several times. Again, it's public comments allowed at city commission meetings, public comments allowed at other committee meetings. Public comment should be allowed at General Policy Committee meetings. That's the bottom line. And also, just finally, I hope the Commission will give due attention to this agenda item as well as GFT agenda item, because some of the presentation will be eye-opening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Mayor, there are no other callers. The floor is yours. Oh, wait. Hold on 1 second. We do have one caller. We need to pre-screen. It was a late entry. The caller ending in 1234. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Darlene Pafalo.
Hello, Darlene. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Hi. Thank you. I would like to say what Mr. Scott says about public opinions or public comments, which are public opinions, of course. And if you want people to help with their city things and things like that, I think it's very important to hear what people have to say. If we would be there in person, but we're not. And I think all the meetings should be with public comment so that people can give their 2 cents and their thoughts and their worries or what they're happy about. And I think it's very, very important to even for this meeting for everybody to listen to. Thank you, Commissioners and Mayor. Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Pafalo. That, Mr. Mayor, was our last speaker. The floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you. I need to do one thing. Okay, seeing no further lights, we'll go ahead and move to a motion. The motion is to adopt the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Sacco? Aye. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola. Absent. Dave Santos,
Aye.
Mayor Poe.
Aye, that motion was unanimous. Next item, please.
Next, we have the approval of minutes.
Okay, are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to adopt the minutes from February 25th, 2021?
I move approval of minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Ward, seconded by Commissioner Ariola. Madam Clerk, roll call vote.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayes Santos,
Aye.
Commissioner Sacco,
Aye.
Mayor Poe.
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. Next item, please.
The next item is item 200740, U.S. Job Corps property.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have Harry Glenn with us. Harry, good to see you. Hope you're keeping your head above water up there in DC, but we'll first recognize Mr. Feldman to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. We will be brief. We just wanted to give you an update on the Job Corps site. I'm going to ask Eric Redfield to walk you through a quick presentation, and then Harry Glenn is our federal lobbyist. He's here. He can answer any particular questions as to the federal process that will be underway for the disposition of the site. So with that, Eric.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the commission. Nice to see you all today. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Is that appearing okay?
Yes.
Okay. What we wanted to do today, Mayor, members of the commission, is give you a sort of brief update, as the managers just suggested, about the Gainesville Job Corps site. I do want to note that the issue of the Job Corps site is actually under one of your goals in the city's strategic plan, under Goal 4, Resilient Local Economy. You have a policy action called Job Training and Career Development, and one of the activities there is consideration of repurposing of the Job Corps site. So I just wanted to provide that context starting out. The way we're going to do this is, let's see here. I'm gonna provide you some site overview and background, and then Mr. Harrington and Mr. Glenn, I think, are going to provide you some updates on the current status of the disposition process of the property. And then really we're just seeking some guidance from the commission on next steps as you deem appropriate. So just wanted to remind the commission and the public that there have been a couple of site visits that have occurred over a period of time up to the site. The latest one was a group of us that visited in December of 2020. And we had the mayor and some of the city leadership, as well as some of Santa Fe College leadership, because they have expressed some preliminary interest maybe in some reprogramming of that facility longer term. And then we wanted to note that I had also taken a prior tour over the summer with Commissioner Ariola, and then we understand that Commissioner Ward and then others have been out at the site as well. So we know that some of the commission has been there, but we wanted to give this preliminary overview so we can bring the commission totally up to speed on the site. So just in terms of some of the stats, this is about a 41-acre piece of property. It's currently owned by the U.S. government, the Department of Labor, located proximate to the Airport Industrial Park. And remember, the Airport Industrial Park is north of the Gainesville Regional Airport up on Waldo Road. Based on the property appraiser's data, the assessed market value of the property is about $9.5 million. That's the land and the improvements, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And then there were some preliminary, I think Thomas will get into the more recent history about the vacation of the site, but then there were some, as a result of Hurricane Irma back in 2017, that was when sort of the site started to go into transition a little bit. And so Thomas will talk about that a little bit. And then today really is just about, again, preliminary conversations about repositioning of the site. So just in terms of getting folks kind of oriented to the site, it's located on Northeast 40th Terrace, and just for purposes of orientation, again, the Gainesville Regional Airport would be to the south of the property. The property is delineated in the red hash marks, and has access off of Waldo Road, State Road 24. It lies just to the north, if some of you are familiar with the Florida Food Service property and business owned by the Islams. And then recently, as the commission may be aware or might remember, we've also had the construction of a FedEx distribution center in the airport industrial park. So that's not noted here because it's a little bit early before that aerial's been updated, but it's right in this location. So just immediately south of the Job Corps property. And as you can see, the property is developed on its western side, not so much on its eastern side. Okay, so that's, and the total site is again about 41 acres. I think another interesting issue to remember is that although the use right now is it's vacant and has warehousing, et cetera, the zoning in the entire industrial park is the heaviest industrial zoning that the city has. So it's a heavy industrial zoning for the entirety of the park, and then the Job Corps property, and then just to the north is the Cy Vance chemical plant owned by the Milliken Company. So all of this property in the city of Gainesville is heavy industrial zoning. Just a little history or background, just for those who are not aware of it. I mean, of course, all of the airport industrial park and some of the surrounding property were part of the Alachua Army Airfield back prior to 1948. And then once the war had ended, a lot of that property came over to the city of Gainesville. And actually, the Job Corps property has some interesting history associated with it, because it was really, it used to be, back in the 50s, it used to be a Sperry Rand plant. And it was actually, if you look at some of the history, it was an early sort of economic development project, because I think it was the forerunner of the city's pension fund actually constructed the facility for Sperry Rand, and then took back rents over time. So very early example of economic development in an industrial setting. After a period of time, Sperry Rand obtained ownership of the property, and then they sold it to the federal government back in 1978. I did want to mention in my one bullet point here that I think it's important for the city of Gainesville, just in terms of context, to know that over the last 10 or 11 years, we've been under a consent order with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection under their auspices, but with the federal government, the U.S. Department of Labor, the city of Gainesville, and the successor to Sperry Rand, which is a company called Unisys Corporation. And what this was about was historically, when Sperry Rand occupied the property, they did some of their activities led to some groundwater pollution. And some of that pollution, as I showed you on the map, the city's airport industrial park is to the south, and it was negatively impacting our ability as a city to basically sell property fee simple for development, because as a person on your staff, I basically had to, disclose to folks that we had an existing environmental issue, and of course that, lends some uncertainty to development. So at the time, Marion Ratz and myself and Bill Pence, who does a lot of environmental work, we worked out this consent order, and we got actually Unisys to be the responsible party. And they've actually been engaged for the last 10 years in mitigating that environmental issue. So we are at the point now where we're almost in a natural attenuation situation in the airport industrial park, which is, I feel like, a success. We don't have much property left, but the property we do have, we have an easier time to market it, having basically a solution on the horizon, a final resolution, and then also a responsible party. And I think it's one of the reasons why, FedEx was willing to make their multi-million-dollar investment in the park. The last couple of bullets here, yes, we had, and you can see on this slide, that's what the site looked like around the time of Irma. It was heavily impacted by the hurricane 3 years ago. And at that time, that's when we started going into a transition period with the site. And then, as we mentioned, we've had a number of tours the last couple of years for folks to get up to speed on what the site is all about. In closing my part of the presentation, we wanted to give you a little bit closer view of the existing improvements on site. Some of us have already seen these, but I thought it would be important for basically the other commissioners who might not have seen them and maybe the public to see them. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of slides based on the number outline. One thing of interest here is I believe the building labeled number 1 was actually the Sperry Rand building and was constructed back in the 50s. These other buildings have come online over time since then. But this is sort of the interior of that number 1 building. And I think what's important for the commission to understand is, over the period of years that I've been with the city, I think Job Corps sort of was a known entity out there doing good work, but as the staff, we did not really get too involved in their operations. But I think one of the things that we learned when we took the tours, and I've been on tours before, is that this program, and I wrote up sort of what Job Corps is about in terms of their programmatic efforts in your agenda item, but it's really kind of a program to assist disadvantaged youths who are trying to get vocational or other training in sort of a residential dormitory setting. So I think, over the period of years, this is kind of a self-contained facility in a way, and I think that was brought home for some of us when we actually toured. This main building was principally many classrooms, and then also there was a portion that was more of a male dormitory that you can see in some of these slides in terms of the facilities. There's also, as you can see, and as I go through the slides in the upper right-hand corner, you can see which building I'm kind of talking about. But this was really it's actually a gymnasium, a full gymnasium on the site, built in the 90s. A clubhouse as well, which is more like a community area with community rooms in it, built more recently in 2002. And that's all I have for you. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Thomas, and then I'll be available for questions at the end of the presentation. And Thomas, I will advance the slides whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Pleasure to be with you today. So just to outline the need, as Eric had indicated, the site was given to DOL in 1978 as a Job Corps center. There was only 1 of 4 in Florida, and there were nearly 400 students that were utilizing the center. With the closure, though, this amounts to 50% of Job Corps training slot loss in Florida. And the center had some interesting programs, one being advanced solar installation, another being automotive technology, as well as pre-law enforcement and homeland security. The next few slides, I don't want to belabor all of the various bullet points here, but just to show you a timeline that you have in your backup, starting with Hurricane Irma and the reason for the closure, and then, initially the thought that Job Corps might return, and then later the city being told that it wouldn't. Next slide, thank you. So Mayor Poe, Commissioner Ward had various conversations and communications, and there was a lot of back and forth over the last few years, along with Senator Rubio getting involved, and not just the previous year, but this last year, submitting a legislative provision that, again, spells out the need for having some Job Corps type training program locally and regionally speaking for North Central Florida. And again, this I think this is second to last slide on the timeline, but more communications ensue. Again, I don't want to belabor everything but this just shows you, especially for some of you that haven't been out there, the lag in time and the process that this has taken. So where are we at right now? Well, Department of Labor is still the landowning agency, and as of yesterday, Eric, Harry, and I, along with Fred Murray, talked to GSA, the General Services Administration. It's a federal agency in charge of managing and disposing of federal properties. And as of yesterday, they still have not received a report of excess from DOL. Back in December, several months ago, DOL had informed us that they were going to perform a boundary survey along with environmental assessments on the property, and that this should take place sometime in the spring. As of last week, they informed us that there was not anything they could share at this time. So during the last several months, we were waiting to hear whether this property was going to be, quote, fast-tracked. And fast-tracked is a legislation that FASTA, the Federal Asset Sale and Transfer Act, that came into place near the end of Obama's term, essentially to get underutilized properties off the tax roll. And in many cases, they like to sell these properties in order to make some profit. Next slide, thank you. And that would have gone through an independent agency that was set up by that legislation called the PBRB, or Public Buildings Reform Board. And we were on that list. However, as of a week ago, their board decided to pass us up. And so they had several options. They could have sold the property to market, made money off of that so they could do more. But what they did do instead was are deciding to give it back to GSA. So where that leaves us is back in the non-fast track, conventional, traditional disposition process with GSA. Once they receive their report of excess from Department of Labor. So just to give you an idea of the checklist, as it seems quite extensive and somewhat challenging to navigate, is that once GSA gets that excess report from DOL, they're going to expend time, 30 days, to look over and review all of those documents, make sure everything is appropriate, and then they check to see if any federal agencies have an interest, which typically they don't. But if one does, a federal agency would actually have to pay market value for the property. So hypothetically, if a federal agency has no interest, then it's considered surplus. And then it goes through a homeless surplus screening period. And this is where HUD gets involved. Not only HUD, but HHS. HUD will review the property just to make sure it's suitable for homeless measures or homeless programming. And HHS would handle any interested parties who might be applicants. And one thing to note that we found out just yesterday regarding this specific homeless conveyance is that any entity across the nation can submit an application. And this has actually been done in the past in other communities. And the other thing is they would not have to pay fair market value. The McKinney Act that I know was an act back from 1987 that gave homelessness first priority in these sorts of situations. So if there is no interest in homeless conveyance, then it next goes to public benefit. And this is, I kind of picture this as like an umbrella of sorts, to where local or state entities or governments can do a variety of things that are listed here: economic development, health, emergency management, parks, rec, education. And each one of those options, there is a respective federal agency that helps guide that entity along the way if one is selected for such. If it's education, for example, the U.S. Department of Education gets involved in guidance, and an entity that is using the property, say, for strictly educational purposes, classroom training, et cetera, could potentially get it for 100% free, versus if one wanted to use it more administratively, there would likely be more of a cost to it. Next slide, thank you. If it does get to this point, and say the city or whoever wants or has use of a public benefit conveyance, it will inevitably go to the congressional oversight committees in both chambers of U.S. Congress. And typically, the way GSA described it, there's usually 1 to 2 conversations that they'll have. And also, this is relevant to us because one of the stipulations is that it has to go to these committees if it's over $100,000 value, the property that is. And so given the fact that the property appraiser has that $9.5 million, this obviously would be the case. Next slide. That's it on my end. The only other thing I wanted to mention that, again, was confirmed in our conversation with GSA yesterday is that the overall time frame, once GSA actually gets the excess report from DOL, it's going to take 9 to 12 months. That's what they're looking at, for whatever this process might entail, whether it's going to be homeless or if that gets passed and it goes to a public benefit. And we do have our federal lobbyist, Harry, here for any specific questions you might have related to the nuances of the federal process as well.
That concludes our presentation, Mayor, members of the commission. We're happy to try to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bredfeld, Mr. Harrington. Mr. Glenn, did you want to add anything that's pretty thorough, but is there anything that they left out that you want to make sure we hear?
No, I just the GSA process is, Thomas mentioned the public benefit conveyance. There's various statutes in law that dictate that defines a public benefit. And there are 10 specific cases where GSA could turn over the excess property to a state or local government agency. And each of they're in areas of corrections, law enforcement, education, public health, park and recreation, self-help housing, historic monuments, correctional facilities, port facility, wildlife conservation, airports, highways, or widening of public roads or transmission lines. So each of those cases, if there's a public benefit, the GSA has the ability to waive payment for the excess property. In the case of business, some type of a business development, the receiving entity would have to pay fair market value for that. So that's all under the public benefit conveyance. If there is no state or local agency that decides they want to pursue this property, then GSA would go to the private side and basically put the property up for sale with the goal of trying to achieve a fair market value. In our question with GSA yesterday, they said they rarely ever have a situation where a property is not sold, so it never languishes for a long period of time. So there are some public conveyances. I know there's been conversation about potential job training use out there. There is not a specific public benefit conveyance for job training, so to speak, but there is a public conveyance for educational use. And in this case, if there was we discussed this yesterday with GSA, if there was interest in some type of job training use out there, utilizing that facility for job training, then the Department of Education would have to review those plans and then make a recommendation to GSA on whether to provide the property at cost or for free, basically, at no cost to the local entity, or on some type of a sliding scale, depending on what was going to be used out there. So I think it'd be helpful to know that there are various public conveyances depending on what the level of interest is. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Since we were not approved for the fast track approach, how critical is it that we work with other community partners to develop I won't say fully formed redevelopment plan, but a pretty clear sort of understanding of what we're going to do, versus, I mean, it sounds like we've got a year in front of us while they go through all this process. Are we able to take that year and be a little bit more sort of deliberative and engage with some, community members to tease out what would be the highest, best use from their perspective, so we get to some kind of more developed idea at the end of that 12-month period?
Thomas, you want me to take that one? So Mr. Mayor, it's Harry. I would say, in thinking about the 9 to 12-month period that Thomas cited there from GSA, that 9 to 12-month period is started by the Department of Labor asking GSA to excess to get rid of the property. From that point to when the property is actually sold is 9 to 12 months. Your window, I think, to plan for what you might want to do with that property is, I think, a little bit shorter, because what will happen is once GSA takes the property from Department of Labor to surplus it, then they'll do some base level work. They'll go out and survey the site. They'll do all the things that they need to do. They'll check all the conveyances to make sure that the property is clear, that there aren't any remediation requirements out there. And so they'll do a little bit of work on that, which will take a couple of weeks up front. Once that work's done, then they will put out a notice in the Federal Register that the property is available and give federal agencies 30 days to respond if there's any interest. Once that 30 days is up, if nobody responds, then they put it out they make it available to homeless uses, and they give respondents 45 days to respond to that. Now, at the same time that they notice it for the availability for homeless use, they also, during that same period, would notice state and local governments that the property is available. And if nobody claims it for use for homeless programs, then cities and counties and the state could petition for consideration for use. So I think in thinking about your timing, if you want to make a proposal to GSA for one of these public conveyance uses of the property, you're going to have a plan in place when they start the notice for the homeless availability of the project, because that's when you also be notified that it's available for public entities if there's no homeless use for the project. What GSA did tell us is, as soon as GSA receives the property from the Department of Labor, they will assign a property manager to handle the disposition of the property, and that individual will be in touch with the city as soon as that happens, establish that connection, and start working with you to determine if you have an interest or you're going to have an interest in that, and help step you through that process. So I would say, I don't know, Thomas or Eric, you were on the call, and Mr. Murray was on the call too. I would say if you're going to come up with a plan, you have probably 2 to 3 months max to have a plan, a notional plan in place to share with GSA when the call for opportunity for you to express an interest in the property comes up. I know Eric and Thomas, I don't know, or Fred, if you have anything else to add. I think my math, the timing, I think, is about right.
Okay, that's helpful. And a key word I took out of that was notional plan. So I'm kind of assuming that we don't have to have, say, executed MOUs with other partner agencies or sort of that level of commitment, but at least pretty clear idea of what we would do.
Right. I mean, and what they explained to us is, for instance, we talk about, as an example, if you wanted to do a job training program out there, what you would indicate that interest to GSA. If the homeless period passes, the 45 days that's available for homeless passes and nobody claims it, then they would go to you and they'd say, okay, what is your, how would you like to proceed? And if you say we want to do a job training program, they would then refer you to the Department of Education, and then you would present a plan to the Department of Education for what you have in mind to use the facility for. And the Department of Education will review that plan, and then they will make a recommendation to the GSA as to whether they see a project that's worthy of waiving the fair market value purchase of the project. So there's a little bit of time there, but I think you have to have something to present to the Department of Education when that window opens up.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is the eastern portion of the property developable, or is that really wet?
I don't know that we've ever had, I've never seen an examination of how wet that is, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Santos. I'm not really sure, to tell you the truth. We'd have to probably see some kind of analysis of that.
I think it's pretty wet. We asked that question when we were out there, and a couple people that seemed familiar with the area thought it was pretty wet, but whatever. I don't want that to be the definitive expert analysis. I just remember asking that question.
Because one of the things that it's similar to the size of what we're looking for the arts and festivals site to an extent, and you could be as loud as you want out there, and it wouldn't bother anybody else. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And for homeless services, did I hear you right that if any organization wants to provide homeless services, they would get it free of charge or at minimal charge?
No, they would waive the fair market value purchase if it's for use by the homeless.
Okay.
And that can be for a governmental agency or a nonprofit. It doesn't have to be a governmental agency. A nonprofit could come in and say they'd like to do a homeless program there.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, Commission? So, Mr. Feldman, Mr. Harrington, next steps?
So, Mayor, what I suggest we do at this point is I'm going to have our staff start working on potential notional opportunities that we could look at the site for that would meet the terms of public conveyance, and just start putting ourselves in a position where we can react rather quickly when we need to.
Okay. All right. So there's no action to be taken, but I will go over to Adam for any members of the public that may want to speak on the issue. Adam?
I'm sorry, I had the microphone up. We have no speakers at this time, Mr. Mayor. The floor is yours.
Thank you. We'll turn back to the chamber. Mr. Blount, welcome.
Thank you. I hope the commission is very firmly fixed on the idea of restoring vocational education for this site. And you've been given lots of options, but that is a crucial need. It's been used for that recently. It's set up for that. It makes so much sense to reinvent the wheel that has rolled recently. But I hope that the current owner can be held accountable for completing the environmental mitigation on that site, including whatever may have been revealed or amplified by the storm surge event. And that they can grant that to you according to the use you make of it, and certainly vocational rehab would be a good choice, an eligible choice. But some things need to happen along with that voc rehab idea. There's programs Santa Fe used to have that they need to come back. They dropped some voc rehab as they tried to move toward being a degree granting being able to do four-year degrees and other things, and specialize heavily in some of their health areas, upper-level health areas. So they should continue to be a partner. They were with that inspection, in that inspection with you. But what about the school board? And I think they ought to be a team member in helping create a vocational center. And I want to suggest that it should be a non-residential center for ages 15 to 25 initially. Non-residential would free up some space for more classrooms and for a child care center. And I bring that up because some of you are too young to remember, but in '96, the ideas of welfare reform said getting people out of poverty with the three needed supports of job training, placement, child care, and transportation. So a child care center on site could also be another teaching center. And they could do a garden on site to go into a great dining hall and be another amenity for it. And that could be training in landscaping and ag services. And after that age group is settled in and it's running well, you can move up the age scale initially with vocational rehabilitation clients. That would bring you already in place case management for those new clients. So you'd be bringing on expensive professional help without having to pay for it to move it up the age scale. So please consider making this this neighboring industrial site, this site and its neighboring industrial site into a vocational rehab center again.
Thank you, Mr. Blount. And I will say, having been out there, space, both indoor and outdoor, is not wanting out there. We would not have to choose between residential and classroom space. It is a massive facility, massive. It has a full gymnasium. It's got an area right next door that would actually be awesome for a child care center. Those are relatively new. I mean, those are in great shape. And then the classroom space. You've been out there, it's a labyrinth. I mean, it's like a giant high school. I mean, part of the challenge for this space is there is so much there. It's just so. I mean, the built portion, the open space, it makes it somewhat challenging to try to narrow down how you could efficiently and productively use all of it. But we've got an excellent staff that I know is committed to bringing us some ideas. So we will trust in them, and it sounds like in a couple months, bring something back to us. And any members of the public, just like Mr. Blount shared with us, if you've got some ideas that you'd like us to consider, just forward them to any of us on the commission or all of us, and we can pass those along to our staff to make sure they're thinking about those things. But right now, we're taking the approach no bad ideas. Let's just put everything out there and consider it, and then sort of work our way to what the highest best use will be long term, assuming we can get it. Well, thank you, and Mr. Glenn, thank you for being with us. I hope you enjoyed spending a few moments in sunny Florida, even if it was virtual.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we are then on to our next item, Madam Clerk.
Our next item is 200739, general fund transfer.
Okay, thank you. This is a long anticipated conversation. A lot of work has gone into this. So it's good to be here. I know that both general government and GRU, on behalf of the city, have needed us to get to this conversation because they are, I won't even say in preliminary budget discussions right now, but getting really into the meat of it, and they have to know, what the commission's direction is to move forward. you know, I'm gonna be that guy just for a second here. In looking through there are three presentations, one from in front, one from general government, and one from GRU. In the GRU presentation, there is constant reference to the city and to GRU as two separate entities. And you know, this, I don't know who put that presentation together or under whose direction, but we have been very consistent as a commission to avoid that language, and that the city is one entity that consists of a police department, a fire department, 5 utilities, a public works department. And it was a little frustrating to see, as we're discussing such an important topic, to see that return to that sort of artificial differentiation that somehow the city is one entity and GRU is a separate. So I wanted to get that out of the way. I'm not, you know, one to sort of dwell on it, but I want to make sure that we're framing this discussion properly, in that we are the oversight board for the entire organization and making a decision on behalf of the entire organization with how to move forward. So to start, I was hoping that we had somebody from in front here to present their findings, and then we'll go through that and answer any commission questions from that, and then we will move to GRU, and they have a presentation, and we'll go through that, and then we'll go to general government, and then sort of see where we are after that. So, Mr. Painter, are you a representative from in front?
I am. I'm John Painter. I'm one of the senior consultants in front and the CEO of the company. And I've got on the phone with me Thomas Washburn and Jonathan Nunes. Tom and Jonathan did most of the heavy lifting on this project, and so they're here and can help me answer questions. I do have some summary material that I can share that would be take us through our rather lengthy report in a little bit more summary level, if you would like.
That sounds perfect. And I'm sorry, Mr. Painter, you said it's Tom Washburn, and who else is with you?
Yes, Tom Washburn and Jonathan Nunes. Tom spent many years with Orlando Utilities Commission and the Florida Municipal Power Pool, and Jonathan Nunes has worked in the consulting for electric utilities most of his career.
Okay, very good. So do you have access to screen share, or how do you want to do this?
I think I do. Let me do that. Hopefully you can see my screen, and I'll put it into slideshow mode. Can you see the slideshow okay?
Yep, we sure can. That's great.
Fantastic. So to provide some context, I'm going to very briefly review what the scope of our assignment was, what our role in the activity was, some of the basis for the financial analysis we prepared, and then we'll go from there into more of the various mechanisms that were looked at and how that impacted the general fund transfer levels. Infront was hired really to look at this question of what should the general fund transfer be, balancing somewhat competing considerations. On the one hand, there's the certainty of funding for the general fund that is a priority. On the other hand, there's the ability to fund for GRU. Does it fit within the budgeted cash flows, if you will, for GRU to fund the amount? And so those two things had to be considered. Sort of a third consideration was, can we develop a process for identifying annually the amount of the transfer that doesn't have to constantly be changed and updated, so that both GRU and those responsible for the general fund can look forward and anticipate the level of the transfer. So initially, we looked at 9 alternative mechanisms, and generally we identify those mechanisms in part by reviewing what is being done by other municipalities in Florida and in other states. We did quite a bit of analysis. From those 9, narrowed it to 3 basic options: the percent of revenues less fuel, the percent of the UPIF calculation, the net revenues that is used in the UPIF calculation. And then option 3 was just a rate per unit of retail sales. And we compared those 3 options under a base case set of assumptions and several sensitivity cases. Now, the base case set of assumptions was really, we were looking forward for fiscal year 2022 and 23. It focused on revenues, operating expenses, and debt service projections for those 2 years. Those projections reflected increases of 3% each year for electric and 5% each year for water. But then we did sensitivity cases based on higher and lower energy sales, higher debt service, and then a sensitivity if there would be no rate increases implemented in the study period. Subsequent to finishing that work, GRU asked us to consider an option 10, and then we compared option 2, which was recommended based on the work that had been done through that time, to a new option, an option 10 for the period fiscal year 2022 out through 2027. And that comparison was made under the base case set of assumptions.
Mr. Painter, can you please pause for a moment just for a question? Commissioner Simmons?
Yes.
Mayor, the question I have is for the planned rate increase that was not considered in the study. Do we know why?
I'm having a little trouble hearing the person asking the question, but I think the planned rate increases were considered. There were rate increases in the information that GRU provided to us for electric and water. Now, was there a different question than that?
It was provided, but it wasn't implemented. So those are 2 different things. So in this study, the planned rate increase, although it was provided, you did not implement it in the study period?
Yeah, it was assumed in the projections of revenue that those rate increases would be implemented. So the revenue that we were working with did reflect the assumption that those rate increases would be implemented. But to test the sensitivity of the decision to the level of rate increases, we did consider a sensitivity case that assumed there would be no increases.
So in this presentation, will you provide the outcome of the potential increase that was implemented in the rate, plan rate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Mr. Painter, please continue.
Okay. So if I could spend a moment, the option 2 and option 10 are the two sort of finalists, if you will, that are being focused on, at least based on the work that Infront Consulting did. Option 2 came out of the initial work, and you find that referred to and analyzed in our January 25th report. Option 10 was analyzed at the request of GRU, and we provided a supplemental letter that compared options 2 and 10. In both options, the mechanism begins with a certain amount of available funds to be allocated, if you will, or distributed by GRU. And that available fund is the available amount of funds is the revenue from the customers and other sources, plus transfers from or minus transfers to the rate stabilization account within GRU's revenue fund, less operating expense other than bond interest, and then less senior lien debt service. That formulation, and I'll show you how that turns into dollars in a few minutes, but that formulation is specified in the bond resolution to be the amount of funds available to be used to compute the UPIF transfer. Option 2 simply provided that the general fund transfer would be 41% of that measure of available funds with no adjustments. Option 10 provided 2 adjustments to that measure of available funds, and both adjustments would reduce the amount deemed to be available for transfer. The first adjustment is that it would remove the effects of transfers from or to the rate stabilization account. The second adjustment would be that it would remove the effects of debt service benefit as a result of the 2019 refund. So under option 10, you end up with a net available to be used as the basis for computing the general fund transfer that is lower than option 2 for the next several years. In both cases, though, once you get to that basis for the transfer amount would be determined by multiplying that basis times 41%. This table shows the potential effect of the 2 different methods. This first table focuses on option 2. And if I could focus first on 2022, the second column of numbers, the net available per the bond resolution after providing for senior lien debt service is shown to be $87.7 million. Under the bond resolution, 50% of that amount is required to be the UPIF contribution. 41% of the amount would then be transferred to the general fund. There was a small amount of subordinate lien debt service, and that would leave $3.8 million of the net available revenue. And basically what would happen is 41% of the net available after senior lien debt service was taken care of would go into the general fund. 50% would go to the UPIF, basically the improvement fund for GRU. And then whatever remained would be available in the revenue fund to be used for other purposes. And the plan, the proposal would be that the amount transferred to the general fund in 2022 would be based on the end of the prior year.
If you'll pause, please, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. Sir, you stated that the senior lien debt of 87.7. Do you mean 91.8 for 2022? Because I think you were speaking of 2021.
The senior level lien debt is 91.8.
Okay.
The net revenue available under the bond resolution after providing for that debt service is 87.7. Shown on line 3.
Right, and you would take 41% out of the 87.7.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then you'll notice that under the current long-term budget for GRU, that line 3 stays relatively consistent. And 41% of that amount shown on line 5 is projected to be relatively consistent between $34 and $36 million approximately through 2027. And then you'll notice on line 9 is that general fund transfer stays pretty consistent at 41% of line 3. Or the net available for the bond resolution. Is it okay to go forward, or are there other questions on this table?
Yes, please, go ahead.
John, just to clarify, the calculations are based on the prior year, as I think you alluded to. So the UPI
sure.
And the general fund transfer based on the prior year's net available revenues.
Sure. Moving on to option 10. Option 10 starts out with the net revenues for the bond resolution, subtracting the senior level debt, senior lien debt. And line 3 is the same as on the prior table. But 2 adjustments are made. One is to adjust to remove the effects of rate stabilization fund transfers, withdrawals, or transfers to the fund. And on line 5, to back out, if you will, the effects of the 2019 debt service restructuring. That's the bigger of the 2 adjustments in the near term. So on line 6, the net available revenue for the GFT computation is lower than on line 3 that was used on the prior table. Then on line 9, you can see that the general fund transfer is projected to be, instead of in the $36 million range shown on the prior table for 2022, $27.7 million in 2022, and then gradually increasing toward $33 million by 2027. And you can see that on line 13, the general fund transfer comprises 32% of the net available revenues, instead of the 41% shown on the prior table, and then increases over time toward 39%. This graphic compares the level of the general fund transfers under the two options and shows what it was in 2021. The dark blue bars are under option 2. The more gold colored bars are under option 10. So you can see the difference a little bit more graphically, same differences we talked about from the prior two tables. It'll take a minute to understand this chart, but I think it would be helpful to you. The total height of the bars here represents the revenue, GRU's net revenue, basically all the revenues of GRU, including transfers from and to the rate stabilization account, minus operating expenses except for interest cost. So that's the total height of the bar, and that's projected to increase over time. The blue, the dark blue area, is the portion of that net that would be necessarily used to fund debt service each year. So you can see that's a large portion of that net. The rust-colored area is the UPIF contribution that is made as required under the bond resolution. It's money that is set aside, or if you will, invested back into GRU for various purposes. The green would be the general fund transfer under the two methods. And the yellow would be the net remaining for other purposes. So, you know, you've got a very large enterprise in GRU, and the option 10 provides, some additional funds each year to be used to deal with, remember, everything we're looking at here is a budget projection. And that's why we fashioned this as more of a percentage of net actually realized than we did of some fixed number, so that as revenues and expenses vary over time, so will the general fund transfer.
Okay, please pause for a question. Commissioner Simmons.
Yeah.
Sure.
In your option 2 versus your option 10 as it relates to restructuring the debt, can you identify that line item in option 2?
That line item, basically what is shown on this table pertains to option 10. Line 5 shows the debt service savings in the first 4 years on the table that resulted from the 2019 debt restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
So the only point where that specifically enters this computation is the idea that you would reduce the, in effect, you would reduce the basis for computing the general fund transfer by the amount of those savings.
Okay.
It's almost like doing a pro forma case where you treat senior lien debt service as though the debt restructuring had not occurred.
So you would, the savings, you would put that into restructuring the debt.
Yeah, that is savings that have already resulted from the debt restructuring.
Okay.
That was done in 2019. It's not being set aside for future debt restructuring. It's just being accounted for in a way where those debt service savings aren't allowed to impact the amount of the general fund transfer.
Now, let me ask you a question. Why is that important in this discussion?
It was important because GRU management felt that the general fund transfer, the amount available for the general fund transfer ought to be determined as though those savings did not exist. So we were asked to look at the computation to determine how it would impact the general fund transfer that we were calculating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Do any other commissioners want to jump in at this juncture? I understand we had multiple presentations, so I want to thank you for, unless you've got more to go through, of course.
Just a very brief statement at the end here. This will be my last chart. This gets to the sort of bottom. Our final report concluded option 2 best balanced the competing objectives because it resulted in a fairly flat general fund transfer. It would be less volatile than other options we looked at, and it provided a strong alignment between this, as the city thought about its city budget and its GRU budget and tried to manage them both prudently. Option 10 is a better option when you look solely at the interest of strengthening the GRU financial picture. But it may not balance the interest of strengthening the GRU picture with the needs of the general fund as well. That's the difference, but that's not really the proper balance between those two considerations. Isn't for in-front consulting to determine, it's for you and your staff to determine. With that, I'm finished and I'll be happy to entertain any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Painter. Seeing no questions from the commission at this time, let's go ahead and turn it over to GRU.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Yeah, Mr. Painter, if you can take yours down, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Can you, is my screen up?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay.
Can you go to presentation or slideshow or presentation mode or whatever?
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. What you're going to hear from me today is going to be very consistent with what you've heard us talk about over the past, heard the utility talk about over the past several years. The GFT funds a significant portion of the general fund budget, contributes to police and fire, parks and rec, public works. And since its inception in the 80s, that transfer has taken a number of different forms. But it's predominantly been based on utility revenue generation. But regardless of the form of the transfer, at the end of the day, the bond resolution, which represents our covenant to bondholders, outlines the utility flow of funds and directs the parameters as to how the transfer should be paid. And Mr. Painter walked through a little bit of this, but that flow is revenue less O&M expense equals net revenues. You deduct debt service and UPIF contributions, and what is remaining is the funds available to make the GFT payment. And we've been, GRU has talked about since 2019 the fact that it's our position that it's reasonable that the utility should transfer its profit to the general fund, but it's not a reasonable business model that we would consistently transfer a dividend that is larger than the profit that we make in any one year. In other words, it shouldn't exceed our ability to pay. We retained Infront in late 2020 to develop the formula options. As Mr. Painter discussed, I think they developed 10 options. We're talking about 2 of those today. One is option 2 that Infront recommended, and another is option 10. As we went through the meetings with Infront, and they showed us option 2. It was presented to us as 82% of the utility plant improvement contribution that the utility makes, and I'll walk through some of those numbers in a minute. But when we asked the question about how they arrived at that, because number one, a percentage of utility plant improvement is an unusual formula proposal, but we were also curious about where the 82% number was generated from. And the response we got during the meetings was that they began with a $36 million figure because it was not significantly different or a significant hit to the existing general fund transfer of $38.8 million, and then they reverse engineered the 82% that would provide that $36 million. The option 10, I'll say this again, is based on that $27.7 million figure. Simply represents what the utility projects to be the profit in 2022. It is net revenues, net of transfers to or from rate stay, because that could either increase or decrease revenues, net of our debt service payments, and net of our requirement to contribute to UPIF. And on this last bullet, I have a slide in just a couple minutes that has some supporting detail, but the average return on equity that was approved by state utility commissions across the nation in the first 6 months of calendar year 2020 was 9.55%. If you applied that to GRU's equity, that would result in a GFT of about 22.1 million. This is a slide that's pulled directly from Infront's work, and basically what it lays out the option 2. It's the takeaway is that as you look at option 2, they indicate that it is the option that balances the two primary criteria that they looked at, which was the certainty of funding and the ability to fund. But as you go through this matrix, it says that it's balanced, but in certainty of funding, it's no. It does not meet that criteria. Ability to fund, it does not meet that criteria. In common use, no, it doesn't meet that criteria either. This is also a Infront slide from the presentation, from the master presentation that I think is part of this backup. And basically, as Mr. Painter indicated earlier, they performed a sensitivity analysis on option 2 from several different perspectives. And as you can see, all 3 of those resulted in a reduction in GRU reserves. This is the slide that Mr. Painter just showed you. I won't spend a lot of time on it other than to point out 2 things. That the line 5, the general fund transfers, starts out in 22 at about $36 million. And if you divide line 5 by line 4, 36 million into 44 million, you'll come to the 82% of the UPIF contribution that generates the general fund transfer as was described to us as we went through these meetings. Each one of those lines, 22 through 27, line 5 will be 82% of line 4. Once again, this is also a slide that Mr. Painter just showed you. Two things here. I'll just point out that this is the general fund transfer in line 9 is based on our projected profit as we laid out, the net revenues less debt service less UPIF, and it starts at 27.7 million in 2022. So that's about an $8.5 million difference from option 2. The other thing that I'd like to point out, because it was just Mr. Painter discussed it, is line 5, the less 2019 debt restructuring savings. The reason that is not included in option 10 as we proposed to Infront was because the City Commission has already directed that those debt savings from the 2019 restructuring be utilized to fund tech investments, and that's what we are doing. We are planning to utilize that money to 100% from equity fund the dual fuel conversion at DH2, our billing system, and AMI, and that's why it's removed from this piece, because if we're going to use it as the commission directed for those tech investments, then we can't use it as, to also as part of the transfer to the general fund. As I said on a few slides earlier, this is a little more supporting detail on that 9.55%. So you can see it at the top. GRU's equity, based on a calculation of our capital assets less our long-term outstanding debt, is about $231.4 million. The current GFT of 38,285 is a return on equity of about 16.54%, which is almost 7% higher than that 9.55% that represents the average authorized by state utility commissions in the first half of 2020. When you apply that 9.55% against our GRU's equity, that's what generates the $22.1 million that I referred to earlier. This is if
Mr. Minton, if you could please pause for a question. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The return on equity by the state commissions, is that our state or other states, and is that for private utilities or public utilities? What is that number?
It's states all across the nation, and it's cases presented to those respective utility commissions, so it can be both.
Okay, but it doesn't include like property taxes or franchise fees may paid to a utility either, or paid to a city.
No, this is a straight return on equity calculation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Benton.
Okay, this is based on our current operations and approved projects, the $36 to $38 million GFT, and not including costs, any costs that we might have to fund between now and 2027, going towards becoming 100% renewable. The $36 to $38 million transfer will be part of what generates the projected rate matrix that you see there at the top, starting in 22 with electric at 7% and then moving to 2 and down to 1.5. The one other thing that I'd like to point out about that upper matrix is that it's in the red there, that if we do go with this, if these rate increases are put into play over that period 22 through 27, that's going to generate a little over $9 million in incremental utility tax revenues that would be distributed to general government over that period. The bottom matrix is the impact on the monthly bill for individuals who have standard consumption levels of 1,000 kilowatt hours, 7,000 kgals of water and wastewater, or gas at 25 therms. That's the bottom line there. The increase is the monthly change year over year based on that particular rate matrix.
Okay, please pause for a question, Mr. Benton. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Benton, on the question that Commissioner Hayes Santo asked, looking at the percentage, 9.55%, was that a range? How did you?
That was the average.
The average with compared to other utilities throughout the state, public and non-public, public and private, right?
It was the average of the rate in the return on equity in percentages approved by state utility commissions over the nation in the first 6 months of calendar year 2020.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Benton.
And then finally, like I said, this our position is pretty straightforward and it's been pretty consistent. Option 10, the 27 million, represents what we project our profit to be in 2022, and our position would be that it's a difficult business model to maintain if we are transferring on a recurring basis a dividend that's larger than the profit that we generate in any particular year. If you go to the second, the return on equity or return on investment of 22.1 million, that would represent retaining some of that profit in the utility. But I believe, as I said before, we've been consistent all along in that we're comfortable transferring all of that profit, but we don't believe that it's prudent to adopt a formula that would provide for a year-over-year transfer of dollar amounts that are larger than the profit that we generate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benton. You do have a question, Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Benton, do you know how much of our revenue comes from, the percentage comes from within the city limits versus outside? Do you have a rough estimation?
In the electric system, and don't hold me to this, but I believe it's between 65 and 70% inside.
And then on water and wastewater, do you know what that?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that. I don't know that number.
Does anybody on the call know that number, rough estimate off the? Mr. Blarski or Raznick?
Mr. Raznick, do you know that number, or can you get in touch with somebody that knows that number while general government's making their presentation?
This is Jonathan Nunes of Enfront. The water system is 61%, sewer 9%, gas is 64%.
Could that be repeated? I have a hard time hearing that.
61% water, wastewater, and 64% gas is in the city?
That's essentially correct, yeah. The sewer system is a bit different. It's 69% wastewater.
Wastewater is 69, water is 61?
Right.
Okay,
That's the information we received from GRU.
And do we have an idea of altogether, like the total revenue, how much comes from inside the city versus outside the city?
I don't have that number. I'd have to compute it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for all the presentations. This is the level of detail that I've been really excited to review for this conversation, and I just want a little bit of help sort of making sure that I understand the tables that are being presented. When you look at option 2, table 1, and option 10, table 2, I think the number that jumps out to me the most in the differences is that net remaining line, which is line 7 on table 1 and line 11 on table 2. And the difference seems to be several $1 million. In fiscal year 22, the difference is about $9 million. In 23, the difference appears to be about $6 million, and a variance thereof going. So what I'd like to get a better idea of is those net remaining funds. what would be the purpose of those funds? Where would we designate those? And yeah, just speak to that a little bit. Anybody?
Ms. Rasnick, Mr. Benton, can either of you answer that?
I was going to let Mr. Painter answer it since these are in-front tables.
Okay.
The question, could you repeat it for me?
Sure. So looking at tables 1 and 2, right, for options 2 and 10, the net remaining lines said that's the number that jumps out to me, which is that there is that's the main difference is the several $1 million in each net remaining table. There's obviously a much higher number in net remaining on option 10. And the question that I have, and you've mentioned, I don't know why you would be the one to answer this because you've said that you're not giving recommendations on how GRU ought to spend that remaining money, but what would that designated purpose be with those excess funds, the net remaining funds, after all of the initial expenditures lined out in ordinance?
When they have a budget of the size that they have, that net remaining could be used for any number of programs or to replenish reserves, to replenish the balance in the revenue fund. It could be used for any purpose recognized under the bond resolution. They may use it to invest in programs that the city commission has asked them to work on that weren't translated into rate increases. For purposes of what we're looking at here, the important thing is that the net remaining is positive under both option 2 and 10, which means that there is the ability to fund the transfer to the general fund that falls out of the formula, at least under a budgeted projection going out several years. If the rate increases that are embedded in the plan are not implemented, then the general fund transfer would be smaller because the net available would be less and you would scale back the transfer. So
sure.
The important thing I think for today is that net remaining is positive, indicating that it doesn't go beyond the ability of GRU to fund the level of general fund transfer either under option 2 or 10.
Thank you.
Could I address this as well, Mayor? I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm having a problem there.
You may. To raise your hand, you click participants, and there's a raise hand button at the bottom right. But go ahead, Mr. Blarski.
Yeah, I apologize for my technological ignorance at this point. And I didn't recognize the question at first, Commissioner. I apologize. I think the broader point that you've raised is actually a good one, and that is the difference between Table 1 and 2. The increase in that net remaining is ostensibly the ability for GRU to retain the restructuring savings that they undertook in the 2019 transaction, which I think Mark pretty eloquently said was already directed by the City Commission to use for tech investments. So if you look in 2022, and on Table 1, you see $3.8 million compared to Table 2 that has $12.4 million. That additional cash is there for things like AMI, things like DH2, and the other things that we've been directed to do. So if you select option number 2, those monies are no longer there. I mean, I think that's about as close as, unless Claudia is going to correct me with another comment.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, of course.
So the flow of funds, the approved budget that Infront utilized for their calculations was the 2021 approved budget. And this is important because that budget was approved back in 2020. And so we had a number of very large transactions that occurred after that, and then large transactions that occurred before that. So within the 2021 approved budget, there are debt restructuring savings that were put into place to build up the cash reserves at the utility. This is what the commission had approved, to build up reserves and to pay for CIS and AMI. So the piece that you're missing in this table is the reserve calculation on how these numbers are impacting reserves, first of all. The second piece that Mr. Painter neglected to mention was we have a debt defeasance plan that we worked on last year, the 2020 transactions, in order to start to defease a portion of our debt. 1.8 million is sitting in our flow of funds to start to defease debt for 2021. So if we're looking at, let's see, so this is option 2. So if we're looking at that 3.8 million, 1.8 and change is for debt defeasance right off the bat. The other portion would be for reserves. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Yes, that does answer my question. Because I do recall a lot of our decisions over the past few years have been in order to stabilize our cash reserves and be able to shore up those funds. So I just wanted to verify that we are still in position to do that. Well, I suppose we need to get through the rest of it. But thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Let's then pull up. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Rasnick.
I apologize. If you could indulge me for just a moment, if we could go to the option 10 slide. Line 5, the debt restructuring savings, that's the portion that's moving into reserves in order to pay for CIS and AMI. So our request to pull that out of Infront's calculation was to keep the integrity of the commission's directive to use those funds to build up reserves and to pay for to pay for CIS and AMI. So you can see the dollars there. That's what's really creating that spread between the $36 million number and the $27 million number. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so if you take your screen down, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Johnson, before we move on to the last presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Mr. Rasnick, can you give us an overview of what our cash reserves look like for the utility?
I'm assuming you would want it at the end of 2020?
Yes.
That was the year. Yes, let me pull it up.
And maybe some context about it also?
As far as what makes up the reserves?
As far as how the percentage of the reserves that you feel as utility is necessary to maintain the stability of the financial stability of the utility and also our bond rating.
Okay, so this is going to be a bit of probably a longer answer than you may want. So the 2019 transaction was specifically to start moving money into reserves in order to pay for CIS and AMI. So we see a spike at the end of 2020 in our reserves. So they're right around 100 million on a plan of 77. The issue is there is a very quick drawdown in those reserves because of the Deer Haven 2 gasification, right? That was moving the coal plant so that we could have a dual fuel for natural gas. The CIS project is a 2-year project. That's going to pull about 13 million out of EPIF. And then AMI is also a 2-year project. And so that'll pull roughly about 40 million out of EPIF. So the 2019 transaction was designed to do a couple of things. One was to build up the reserves so that we weren't running into a potential negative reserve situation and rate stabilization, but also to pay for CIS and AMI. So it's important to note that while those reserves are high, they will ramp down very, very quickly over the next couple of years, which is why we've been talking to the commission during our one-on-ones about the rate increases. Hopefully that answers your question. So 2019 was to build up reserves. These 2 major projects are drawing them down pretty rapidly, plus Deer Haven 2 for the electric system.
So would it be fair to say that withdrawing them down, I heard numbers like 40 million and et cetera over the next couple of years. So are we drawing our reserves down to what number would you say? 70 million over the next couple of years?
We will draw them down below a place that we should be comfortable at without rate increases. So that's where the 7% comes from. It's designed to make sure that the reserves stay at the levels that the commission has approved, but also be able to pay for CIS and AMI and the GFT at the 36 or 38 million. That's what's creating that 7%. The $27 million number, which is what our calculation of what we have available to pay, the 27, creates a much lower rate increase in the electric system, of course, because it's an $11 million difference.
Okay. Is it possible to quantify much lower than we would be comfortable with? Like what percentage?
I think to put it simply without continuing to throw out numbers, the reserves are at a level that are comfortable right now. And it was designed to be that way because of these projects. And I keep mentioning these projects because they're very specific and very large and have a large drawdown at the utility. So when you're looking at that slide that says option 10, that has the $10 million going across the next couple of years, essentially that's spoken for reserves and for these major projects. So what Infront is recommending in option 2 is we don't take that debt restructuring savings and use it for reserve CIS and AMI, but instead use that to fund the general fund transfer. So the general manager and I had a number of conversations when we were going through this is what is the number to actually cover everything, right? To cover reserves, to cover these major projects, CIS, AMI, and Deer Haven 2, and to cover the $36 or $38 million general fund transfer that the consultant is recommending. And that's where those rate increases came in. So if we don't have the rate increases at that level and the general fund transfer remains at 36 or 38, it creates downstream effects at the utility. So the utility would have to make a choice with the commission to essentially, instead of pay as you go equity, what the 2019 transaction was designed to do to pay for these projects, we would have to say, commission, you're going to have to make a decision to issue debt to pay for those projects, which increases our leverage. So it's a bit of a cycle. So the 2019 transaction was designed to do a certain thing. If it's not going to do that thing, then we end up moving our leverage numbers up. And I apologize. I know I just said a lot, and I don't know if that answers your question, so I'll pause.
Yeah, I think it does answer the question. What I'm really trying to calculate in my head based upon what I'm seeing is that it sounds like we're going to be asked to make a decision about whether or not to draw down our reserves and then potentially pay them back later in later years based upon these numbers. That's what I'm seeing, but I might be seeing it the wrong way.
Our reserves are calculated in a certain fashion. We went through the cash balance reserve policy back at, oh my goodness, I think it was February of 2019. And that was some pretty extensive work. It's about 6 months of work working with PFM to determine what the appropriate cash levels were at the utility. So right now, it's 60 days of operating cash, our rate stabilization, and the portion of UPIF that is not spoken for construction projects. And those are important to maintain the integrity of, because we will have rating agency issues, and not only rating agency issues. You have kind of the rainy day, right? So we had, the Irma issue, the hurricane in 2017, where the utility had to pay out over $5 million. It takes a while to get that money back. So reserves are really important. They're also important to our leverage figures. So if our reserves drop too fast, our leverage moves up accordingly. So it's important to protect the reserves. So,
I also want to make clear that it's not something that I am proposing or suggesting or is smart to do. It's just a decision point that it sounds like we're going to have to consider based upon the information that we have right now. So, I mean, I want it to be. I know there are plenty of folks out there watching this that can misconstrue questions. So it's only that I see that as being a decision point. And also, we also can't commit future commissions. So, that needs to be said too.
So, Mr. Mayor, I did have some closing remarks that might kind of wrap this up. I can wait to do those, or?
No, go ahead, before we get the next presentation up.
Okay. And at the end of those closing remarks, I do have the potential options for the commission for you to think through based upon some of these questions. So if you don't mind, I'll kind of move through this pretty quickly. So I do realize we have another presentation. So first, we've heard from Infront option 2 and option 10, and we've heard from GRU that it's not as simple as what you've seen on those two options. There are other mechanics behind the scenes that can impact the utility's financial health, our reserves, and how we move forward. Obviously, I can't underestimate how important that this decision is to the entire city of Gainesville as we move forward. And it's not an easy decision. So this has been going on for many months. I think actually for a couple of years with the commission. So I just wanted to thank everybody that has been involved in this process. That's GRU staff, that's the commission, and the consultant and general government. These have been very tough discussions. I would like to reiterate a few of the following facts so that everybody has these kind of clean. The options that the consultant provided, option 2 is not in compliance with the terms of the actual contract. The contract was for the consultant to balance the ability of GRU to pay the GFT over time with certainty of funding for general government. And as you saw on the slide that Mark showed everyone, it's a no for both of those. The formula that was created from the UPIF calculation, they backed into a percentage in order to get to 36 million. Nowhere in the contract do you see 38 million or 36 million. So the consultant has chosen that number. So I just want to make sure everybody is clear on that. Obviously, GRU is highly leveraged. So any movement out of not using UPIF dollars for capital activity will have a direct impact to our debt levels. So in order to fund the capital, we'll have to issue more debt than expected. We've been trying extensively over the past year to put together a debt defeasance plan in order to bring that down. it looks really good. It's a nice number, but going through time, we still have to issue debt in order to fund our capital. So these discussions about CIS, AMI, and reserves, they're going to be critical as we move through this process, because if there's a choice not to pay for CIS or AMI with UPIF reserves, it means additional debt for the utility, which increases leverage. GRU's cash levels are critical to our reserves. If anyone would like for me to go back through the cash balance policy information, I can do that at a separate session for everybody. The cash levels at the utility had been declining rapidly before this was put in place with the commission. So working with the commission, we put in floors at the utility. The rating agencies loved the cash balance policy. They liked the floors so that it provides, it's a floor. It's not flexibility, it's a floor as far as the cash. Since we were talking about debt, GRU restructured debt back in 2012, right before the biomass came online. Those payments started coming due in 2019 and 2020. That restructuring back then was designed to essentially offset the effects of the biomass plant coming online. 2019 restructuring was designed to stabilize the reserves and pay for these major projects. These are things that I, as the CFO, don't like to do. The positive piece of the 2019 transaction, as long as it does flow out the way that it was planned, it will work. So I spent some time recently kind of going back through some of the history, some of the general manager's white papers, and I've got a couple of points that it was a little bit eye-opening for myself. So GRU has had a bill issue since at least 2004. So I had our rates department put together our bill compares, and we started kind of marching towards the top almost 15 years ago. So the bill issue is not a recent phenomenon, but it is something that impacts all of us on a daily basis. Our high leverage isn't new. Our debt began increasing substantially in 2004 and 2005, and then essentially doubled with the biomass contract. When you review our audited financial statements, and this is something that's been shared with the commission, general government, and in front, the utilities essentially paid out more than they had available to the general fund transfer for about the past 18 years. So that is also not a new phenomenon. And this is very positive as far as how beneficial the utility is to the city overall. We fund $55 million of city services just through GRU operations. It's 41% of the general government budget. That's a $38 million in the general fund transfer. It's $14 million in utility tax, and then $3 million for indirect costs. Mark had mentioned this briefly, but any increase in utility rates raises utility taxes, which increases revenue for general government. So there is a little bump at general government whenever that happens. So I would like to say that there's been a lot of opinions how to put together a formula. And if you go back through the history of the GFT, this has been going on, I think, since 1986. You know, it's changed periodically as far as what the GFT should look like. But at the end of the day, if it's more than the utility can afford, more than the utility has available, then it creates additional pressures within the utility. So these are the options, Commissioner, Mayor, that I wanted to mention. If the commission chooses to keep the general fund transfer at 38 million or even 36 million, it's still more than GRU can afford without significant rate increases. That's the piece. If the rate increases are put in, the utility can afford the payment of the general fund transfer, the O&M costs, the debt service costs, and funding reserves. It's that one-time bump in 22 for those rate increases, and then after that, the projections are essentially CPI. It's a bump in 2022. It's a very hard thing to do, but after that, we're looking at CPI adjustments because it's putting in a floor at the utility. If the commission chooses to move the general fund transfer to 27 million, it's a lower rate increase in the electric system. it's right around 2% because there's still some reserve components in there. And if the commission chooses to move it to 22 million, it's 1%, and that's because of those reserve calculations. So you can see the wide swing as far as what's happening there. So those are the options that we had put together. Does anybody have any questions? And Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to make those comments.
All right, thank you, Ms. Resnick. I appreciate that. Whoever from general government has their presentation, you can go ahead and share your screen.
All right, Mayor, I had to unmute, so I'm back sharing. Everybody can see the screen. I will go to slideshow mode. We're good, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mayor, Commissioners, I will be brief, but I just wanted to run through sort of a perspective. But before I do that, I want to say from general government's perspective, the consultant did do what they were supposed to do. We were seeking an unbiased approach. They generated 9 options. They recommended option 2. At GRU's consideration, they included an option 10, but it was not an option that they were recommending. And it was developed after the 9 were done. So just for the commission's edification, your property tax levy, which is the primary source of revenue that's at the discretion of the commission, has been increasing each year. Your general fund transfer has been level in the last 3 years or last 3 budgets. And as you can see, it's gone through some ups and downs, but it's been level for the last 3 cycles. Show you as a comparison in terms of growth, you can see that the curve for property taxes is a lot higher on slope than the GFT. And what that means is that over a period of time, the amount of GFT that the city relies upon for its operating costs continues to diminish. I felt it was important to take a slide out of the Enfront report that does show that this is not something that is unique to the city. Other cities that run electric utilities and water, sewer, waste, water and sewer utilities, gas utilities as well, all have it. What is, I think, unique about Gainesville is, one, the amount of tax-exempt property we have, and from GRU's perspective, the debt-to-revenue ratio, which is higher than the other utilities. But all in all, the GFT as a percent of total utility revenues, I think that the 38 million that we currently have is well in line with what others are getting or transferring to their general governments. I wanted to spend just a minute on this slide because I think it's important. The traditional method, and this was also pointed out in Enfront's report, is that a private utility, if they were operating within the city, would be paying a franchise fee as well as property tax on there. That of course is not paid for from the city's utility, and so the traditional method for calculating a general fund transfer would normally be a payment in lieu of taxes, franchise fees that would be paid for by the private sector, as well as a return. And I want to just deviate from the numbers that you see here for fiscal year 23 for a second, and just say, if we use the number that Mr. Benton showed at little over 22 million for the dividend, and you take roughly 60% of the property tax and franchise fee generated, because I'm not sure Enfront made a distinction between city and non-city neighbors, but and properties. But I will make that distinction and make a rough assumption of 60% of that would be generated only from inside the city. If you take those three components and you add them up together, you would be at 38 million, which is roughly where we're at currently on there. Reducing through option 2 will be a hit on the city. It is significant. I think the reference that was made in the presentation by GRU was that it would be not a significant hit, but a 5% reduction in the GFT would be a significant hit. But I've directed our staff to start, working at that. If we reduce it to 27 million or 22 million, I will tell you, you will need a tax increase or fee increase, or we will need to cut services. I know GRU in their presentation shared an effect on rate, but I thought I should show you what each $1 million of GFT reduction will do to the monthly impact on property taxes within the city. So these are on a month basis. So if you had a house that was valued at $200,000 and with homestead exemption, and you had a $6 million reduction in GFT, that would equate to just under $120 a year in increased property taxes to make the city whole, just to give it a perspective for you. So I'm here really to answer questions for you and to see if I can, give you any more details, the impact on the GFT.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Feldman. Thank you, Mr. Benton, Ms. Rasnick, Mr. Blarski from GRU, and thank you, Mr. Painter from In Front. I know that a lot of work has gone into this, and there's a lot of discussions that have been had between the parties prior to today. So I want to just start off with a few general thoughts. I appreciate Ms. Rasnick and Mr. Blarski pointing out that some decisions were made by the commission, with some of our restructuring with certain intents in mind, and I don't dispute that at all. That certainly was the conversation. But whenever we're making fiduciary decisions, we're doing it with the information we have in front of us and the conditions we have in front of us at the time. I really want to underscore something that Commissioner Johnson said, which is, you can never obligate future commissions to certain budgetary decisions, except when you issue debt. You are most certainly obligating those future commissions to debt payments. But how they might prioritize different spending in each annual budget is up to that commission that year, during that process. And so, we did not have a discussion about the GFT. In fact, we'd made a very deliberate decision a couple years ago to hold the GFT flat, I think for A, budgeting predictability, and B, with the understanding that we at some point in the future, near future, would be coming back and trying to agree on a longer term strategy and formula that would be equitable, meet the needs of both organizations, and be consistent, be predictable. So here we are. We don't make these decisions in a vacuum. So, as this board, we are ultimately going to make a decision based on what we think is in the best interest of our city, and weighing how that decision both positively and negatively impacts the entire organization. One piece of information that we almost got today, but didn't quite. And that's why I'm going to ask for this to come back at a future meeting, hopefully near future. I know that both GRU and general government budget staff would like some direction so they know how to continue preparing their budgets. And I feel very aware of, the longer we put this off, the more difficult it is for them to do some of the work that they need to do. But we need to look at this through an equity lens. And we need to look at how pulling these different levers, reducing GFT, and compensating for that revenue loss with increased property taxes, leaving GFT where it is, or some combination thereof, how that is going to affect our neighbors in Gainesville over the course of a year. And I would like to see a side-by-side table. I think GRU gave us some data and general government gave us some data, but what would that really look like for our residents, over an entire 12-month period? And I want to be sure to include renters in there, because that's more than half of our neighbors. And usually when we put in that comparison, $150,000 property valuation or $200,000 property valuation, we're thinking, usually single family owner occupied. So it's homesteaded. But our renters, of course, pay a heavier burden of taxation because they're living, whether it's a single family house or a duplex or a multifamily, they are paying full freight on property taxes, increasing the burden on them. So those need to be figured in to those calculations, so we can really look at them side by side and see how our decision is going to impact all of those neighbors. I feel very confident that we are close to a plan that can offer stability to both the utility, actually all 5 utilities, and the general government departments over at least the 5-year planning horizon. I really think that we're close on that. I think we need to consistently remind ourselves of how the people paying for this, our neighbors, do or don't have control. And so, if we shift the burden to property tax, people have really no control over the property tax that they pay. In fact, the only thing they can really do is increase their amount of property tax by doing a bunch of improvements on their home. But they're sort of locked into whatever the appraiser's valuation is, capped at a Save Our Homes 3% rate. Whereas people do have control, much more control over their utility bill. And that is an area that I know our UAB has been focusing on, and that we will continue focusing on, especially helping folks that struggle the most with their utility bill find ways to use that demand side management approach to reduce the pressure. And so it's a lot more realistic to think we can go help people lower their bill than lower their property tax obligation. That's not something that was discussed. And I'm not throwing any stones here to anybody involved, to any of the 3 parties involved. We did not ask you to do that for this presentation today. I mean, it was a pretty narrow ask by the commission, and that's what you brought us. But these are decisions that we need to, this is information that we need before we give final direction to our senior staff on what we think is the most equitable way to fund our entire government. And so, that's my ask right now, a side-by-side comparison of the impact on our neighbors, sort of at different rates, including both homesteaded and non-homesteaded neighbors, and funding our services through, I think there's an absolute, keep it where it is, 38 million, not really doing anything with property tax, bringing it down $12 million and making up for that revenue shortfall through property tax. And there's obviously an in-between. There's other approaches that kind of mediate between those two. And then, consider the impact through our equity lens, and who will be impacted the most based on those various options and solutions. Once I get that, I will be ready to make a decision. I know that that is the data I need to feel confident in making a decision that's in the best interest of our neighbors here in Gainesville. And so I'll just sort of defer to staff. I think that you can probably get all of that together and work with Ms. Marshall's office to shine the equity light on it and give some analysis on that. And then we can move forward. Y'all will have your marching orders, and you'll be able to move on with your budget preparations. So, commissioners, that's where I am. Again, thank you very much. Everything presented was very helpful. I just need a little bit more before I can make a final recommendation or decision. With that, and Commissioner Johnson, I do see your hand. I've got a few lights that came on before you here, but I will definitely get to you. So we'll start off with Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, GRU, GG, and consultant staff. I appreciate all the work. I know it's been working on it for a while. To the mayor's point, I think one of the things to look at too is that our rental housing ordinance should reduce utility usage in rental homes as well, so that will should lessen the impact of utility increases or whatever they might be in that area too. We had an independent consultant come back with a proposal. We've had, as long as I can remember, there's been arguments on both sides, general government, GRU. That's the system we have of trying to come up with GFT and coming up with an independent person to give us a recommendation. I don't think it's a perfect recommendation. I think there could be better ways to do it, but it's what we have in front of us, and I think it gets us closer to where I think we should be. And I support us moving forward with option 2. That's cutting the GFT. And then I also think coming into the coming up budget year, I do think GRU needs to, budget staff needs to look at, we need to look at cost savings and cutting costs on the GRU side to help increase reserves. I think that's something we have to be looking at. So right now I'm with option 2. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner, I think Sacco, is that right? Yes, Commissioner Sacco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To your point of concern on renters, because they do make up the bulk of our neighbors in the city, one thing that is going live in a few months is the landlord permitting and housing inspections and regulations for energy efficiency. So as you said, that is something that can be modified, that can be made better. And so I wanted to reiterate that is something that is going live in 6 months, which will help bring down costs. I know that we've been presented many options and that all options include a rate increase to some extent. But I wanted it reiterated that we are making strides on the other half of the equation to bring down the costs felt by our neighbors who are renters. That said, I agree with you that I want slightly better comparisons before making my final decision, just to see the dollar amounts that will impact homeowners and renters, given each of the options and what that looks like in terms of dollar amounts for each group, so to speak. and slightly more information than the average of 1,000 kilowatt hours. Because not everyone uses that average. I know I go a lot lower. I know some folks who go a lot higher. And I think having more of a range of what this will look like is something that I need before going forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, first of all, to everyone at the manager's office, general manager's office, and our consultant, everybody at general government, GRU, and outside folks. I appreciate the work you've done. It is clearly an enormous amount of work that has gone into this. I had to chuckle a little bit when the mayor pointed out that it was a narrow ask by the commission because the product we got back was pretty broad spread for a narrow ask, in my opinion. There are tremendous wealth of options here, but we don't have all, as the mayor's pointed out, we don't have all the information that we need to make a good decision before us. What I would like to get back from GRU when we talk about impact on neighbors is something more like, what number is it here? Slide number 8, I think, that the city manager provided us, the monthly impact of millage increase for homesteaded property. A table like that, where we can see what does this mean to people at various levels of usage, at various levels of increase. And it's important to point out too, as Commissioner Santos alluded to, we don't just have two levers. We don't just have rates or taxes and fees. We have rates, taxes and fees, and savings. None of us want to consider savings, but that's a real thing. I mean, when we talk about, you know, reaching into our neighbors' pockets as opposed to making sure that we have tightened our belts to the degree that we can without impacting the product that we offer our neighbors, because that's important. When we talk about savings, those savings don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because we're offering a lower level of service, whether it's through the utilities or through general government, to our neighbors. When we save, we're doing that by cutting services. So I don't tread there lightly at all. But those are our three levers. You know, they're savings / cutting services, there's taxes / fees, and there's rate increases. That's how we find new numbers. Make no mistake, option 10, I recognize all the information and all the arguments that have been made for it. I get it. But a 27% decrease in 1 year in the GFT is kind of a big deal. And I know that gets made up for in later years. So something I'm going to ask you to do also is consider something that is neither 2 nor 10, that takes a slower approach to getting what you're trying to get to. When you look at option 10, the total savings over the course of 6 years, by my quick math, is a little over $47 million. Option 2, the savings over that same time period, is more like $20 million. So that's a really big spread in total savings. If what we need to save is closer to $47 million, then let's find a way to do that on a stepped approach that doesn't involve jumping off a cliff the first year. And I understand that there are lots and lots of variables that impact that. I'm not misunderstanding that, believe me. So all that said, the most important thing we need back is the information on what finding more money looks like for our neighbors. Looks like for us, because we're all taxpayers and GRU ratepayers as well. I really appreciate the effort and the work that's gone into this. And I know that we're asking you for more, and I know that we're putting off the building of budgets by asking you for more information. And I know that makes things very tense for everyone, and I apologize for that. But we absolutely do need this further information. What I was hoping we conveyed in previous meetings and in private conversations that I've had with you all, that I don't think we did convey, was that it's easier for general government and GRU officers to get in a room together and come up with the right numbers than it is for you to bring two different sets of numbers to us and say, here you go, we couldn't figure it out. And I understand that it's really hard on your side to do that, but we have to do it up here when we're not even, we're separated by all these shields. And we can't just pass pieces of paper around and say, hey, look what I figured out. How about this? How about that? We cannot have those conversations privately. We can't sit around a table and just spitball it. It's illegal. This is the best we can do to try to come up with good solutions. What you're looking at here is not a great way to come up with good solutions, but it's what we have to do. So honestly, I was hoping to get something closer from you all. And I know how hard it is. I'm not insensitive to that. I didn't do a good enough job of telling you that that's what I was hoping for. We'll get it figured out. But we're going to need that extra information from you all. Thank you. I've talked enough. Appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola, and then Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really great information. For me, this gives a very clear picture. And I remember when we had that general policy meeting to discuss freezing the GFT, and I was in favor of it then, because I felt as though we needed a much more thorough third-party analysis of the government's funding, and I want to thank Mr. Painter and his company for being able to provide that, because it has given us I think a really good baseline to work from. And every year it's the same. We measure which levers are the right ones to turn and in which direction in terms of what's best for the people of Gainesville, and also to meet ends meet for serving the people through their government and their utility. So I'm not ready to commit myself to any of these options today. I think that I'm going to do a lot of number crunching myself to figure out where I'm comfortable, because it's and really I think we're in a pretty good place. I think because of the decisions that this commission has made over the years, at least since this commission's been together, I think we've got ourselves in a really good financial place on both sides of the house. But every year it's a challenge to make sure that you keep making those good decisions based on really solid data. And so I think we're headed in that direction. So thank you all. I really appreciate all the thought that has gone into this. And for my colleagues, I will say that while I've not made up my mind as to which option or a hybrid of any of these options I would prefer, I definitely think that one of the numbers that jumped out to me was we are relying less on the general fund transfer as a whole portion of government. So I think that there is more room to decrease that. But at the same time, to me, that is not an indication that that we should expect government services to take wholesale reductions just because of that fact. So I think I'm in a place where I'm prepared to reduce the GFT, but it has to be done in a way where we can both continue the excellent levels of service that people come to expect from Gainesville, but also balancing the types of cash stabilization and reserves that we need for the utility, because that's been the culmination of all of our financial decisions. And once a lot of these capital projects have gotten underway, we're going to realize a lot the benefit that they do give to the people. So I think there will be a little bit less trepidation about spending that money as we go on. So thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know exactly what tables I would want to see, but if you all have any ideas, I'm open to hearing that. I think I'm going to be creating my own tables for a little while now, so I'll share that in the future meetings if I feel as though they pass muster. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question for the city manager. Can you remind me how much money we saved through the restructuring of the pension bonds? So I have that question. The second question is, when do the savings begin? And then the third question is, how is that money being allocated?
So the answer from the general fund side, because there's other funds, and I don't recall the number for GRU, but the general fund side is about $4 million a year.
Okay.
For the current fiscal year, we are letting that flow through to fund balance, but there have been some unanticipated expenditures that we've had in fiscal year 21, where we're going to tap into some of that fund balance. For example, we have to make another $500,000 payment to GroupCom for the trunk radio system. We had about another $900,000 payment to the sheriff for the combined communication system, both of which were not budgeted. So some of that $4 million is being used for, and the savings will be built into our expenditures for fiscal year 22 and beyond. Mr. Benton may know.
Mr. Feldman,
offhand what
Mr.
the
Benton, I
number
think
was.
you, if you could put your thing on mute, I think we're getting a little just white noise there. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
I think Mr. Benton might have the number for the GRU savings from the POBs.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's about $2.8 million, but if you recall, the City Commission, as part of the approval of that pension obligation bond on the GRU side, directed that those savings be used to defease debt. So it's set aside. It's part of the debt defeasance plan that we'll be bringing to you in early May, probably.
Thank you. Did we give any direction to the general government side about how to allocate those funds?
No, we had indicated at the time that we were just going to let it flow through to fund balance for fiscal year 21, and then we would make appropriations in fiscal year 22 forward.
Okay, so it's fair to say that there is an additional, so you said $4 million, is that $4 million for the next, I think you said it was 9 or 10 years, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's fair to say that there's an additional $4 million unanticipated that we have, that we didn't know about, a couple of years ago, or even a year ago, I think at this point. Now is not the time to get into it, but I'm very interested in hearing more about the unanticipated $900,000 for the sheriff and the trunk radio system, or the trunk.
So I can give. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah, the 500,000 was for the trunk radio system, and the 900,000 was for what again?
So back before I arrived in the city, you had a presentation from then Sheriff Darnell.
Yep.
Asking for additional $1 million.
Yep, I remember.
Expenditure for salaries. So we got the bill.
So we got the bill and we paid it, even though we gave direction that it's something that we wanted to happen over a 3-year period because, well, now's not the time to get into that. It's clearly not the time, but it's something that is a little flag for me. So I'll have a conversation with you about that later.
Okay.
So I'm just mentioning that it seems like we have an additional $4 million that we have not given direction about necessarily for fiscal year 22. So that's something that we can take into consideration when making this decision. Is that fair to say?
So that's partly where my recognition that taking the GFT from 38.3 million down to 36 million was some of that $2.3 million would eat into that $4 million. Plus we have increased expenses that we know that are coming. And so as we start looking at the impacts of COVID on our finances and so forth, going into fiscal year 22 with what would be now 1.7 million, because again, we had anticipated 4 million, the GFT would bring that down to about 1.7, which is not a lot of money on our side of the shop.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you conclude, Commissioner Johnson?
I do, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like some more information if we're going to be asking for more on commercial properties as well, both on changes in property taxes and utilities. We're talking about how we want to help local businesses and things like that, but those are hits to them as well. So I would like to get that information. And then I'd also like to get for the residential side, the average utility usage, when we're calculating those numbers, to have those broken out for average utility use, what that would average cost would be for inside the city limits and outside the city limits. I believe the average utility bill is smaller inside the city than it is on the outside of the city. And I wonder what the main impact is to our city residents. That's what I'm looking for. So I like that broken up. And then I guess when are we going to have this next GPC? Or I mean, we do need to make a decision as
soon as it's ready.
Okay.
I would like this back before the commission as soon as they have this put together.
Okay. Yeah, because we got to make a decision quick on this. Yeah.
Was that anything close to resembling a motion?
Sure. Let's see. Can we have someone else? My brain's a little.
Well, I think consistently what I've heard from is some information to come back that would include what you just said, commercial, the impact of utility rates and property tax rates on commercial, residential, both homesteaded and not homesteaded. I think Commissioner Johnson wanted some information on the 4 million savings from the pension obligation bond and what's sort of been obligated already from what Mr. Feldman said, what's left over. And I wanted a sort of equity spotlight on how these different decisions would affect our neighbors. And then you said inside and outside the city limits as well.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, the motion was by Commissioner Santos, seconded by Commissioner Ward. Commissioner Ariola.
I don't think I'd be able to articulate the kind of data that I want to get back anyway, so I'd be in favor of it. That's fine.
And look, any of y'all are more than welcome to ask staff to bring that data at that meeting as well, if it's in addition to this. But I think it just to give staff an idea of what we collectively want to see to help make a decision.
So my question is really mostly around scheduling. When do we have our budget workshops? Because we're going to have to review, the millage, the fire assessment, all of that.
Yeah, those don't start till May, but and we're going to need input from our new commissioner-elect as well. So sorry, my battery's about to die. But I would think this could come back at one of our next meetings coming up.
The more we have this discussion prepared for those discussions, the better off we are in those discussions.
I think as soon as possible is the desire. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
I was going to add that to the motion that the staff bring it back and place it on agenda as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, let's open it up to public comment. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one person on the line at the moment, Mr. Nathan Scott. Excuse me, Mr. Scott, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, Nathan Scott. So I just want to say for the record that I do not agree with the in-front recommendation, which fails to acknowledge the statements of the credit rating agencies that the GFT is excessive. that the ROE is excessive and that the requirements of the bond resolution. The City Commission should specifically ask in front while they're here today to comment on the GRU ROE calculation, which, if true, represents the highest ROE in the state of Florida, if not the nation. The recent Duke settlement had a ROE midpoint of 9.85% in comparison. The Florida Public Service Commission would laugh a 16.5% calculated ROE request out of the room. So what the City Commission needs to do, and the citizens have been saying this for over a decade, commissioners, is you need to cut the GFT before you continue to destroy the financial health of the utility and bankrupt GRU customers. The calculated return on equity from GRU is excessive, and again, it's the highest in the state, if not the nation. That should be a red flag that the GFT is excessive. And finally, I think GRU customers object to the proposed multi-year rate increases that are a direct result of the mayor and the Gainesville City Commission failing to cut their wasteful spending. It's atrocious that you guys would have the audacity to suggest that GRU continue to cut its budget, but you guys continue to spend. That's just irrational government, commissioners. My recollection also of the debt restructuring was the proceeds were supposed to be used to pay off the $1.9 billion amount of debt. The one exception that I recall was a $10 million for unspecified capital project, which upon further questioning was Murphy Wellfield for water something. We couldn't get a straight answer on that. Mr. Feldman is also incorrect on his asserted proxy for a GFT. A city without a utility is entitled to a franchise fee and property tax. Accordingly, a city-owned utility would be entitled to a reasonable return on investment, and property tax is not a franchise fee, not all three. Finally, it's pretty interesting that GRU, Ms. Resnick seemed to realize what the citizens and GRU customers have been saying for over a decade when she cited all these problems. I mean, we've been telling you that. It should come as no surprise. It's equally ironic that Commissioner Areola, who's been on the commission for years now, doesn't seem to know what GRU reserves are used for and have to ask questions. If you guys can't figure that basic concept out, you don't need to be making this decision, commissioners. It's just you can virtue signal and make lengthy speeches all you want and play politics and delay, but that doesn't change reality, commissioners. The problem is not with GRU. The problem is with the Gainesville City Commission and the ongoing mismanagement of the utility at your own hands. That's the problem, whether you like it or not, whether you like me or not, whether you like the citizens or not. That's the problem. That's the problem you don't want to grapple with. You continue to make excuses about renters and all this other nonsense.
Mr. Scott.
It's just ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, we have a couple more callers on the line. I'll screen them as we go. With the caller ending in 0244. If you're here to talk about the general fund transfer, kindly introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so very much for taking my call. I'm Debbie Martinez, and this is all pretty basic. High GRU bills are regressive because when city commissioners create high utility bills, GRU bills, lower income people suffer the most because a larger portion of their income goes to paying their GRU bills compared to high income earners. So if you truly cared about helping hardworking people, the elderly living on fixed incomes, and the poor, commissioners would do the hard work and cut your bloated budget. This is how you lower GRU bills for our people, those you refer to as our neighbors. The solution to preventing more poverty, homelessness, and more suffering for our poor is for commissioners to cut your bloated budget. For the past 4 years, I have watched the commission approve a mountain of costly projects and programs that always falls on the backs of the poor. Actions speak louder than words. Help the poor. Please do the hard work that you need to do and cut your bloated budget. You don't need to be looking for more funding sources. You need to cut your budget and lower GRU bills. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Next caller, Mr. Armando Grundy Gomez. Mr. Gomez, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I had a question for you. Out of the 2 proposals, can anyone, maybe yourself or anyone, answer how much of any of those 2 proposals of savings would go toward the debt service of GRU? And I don't know if that's a question for you, Mr. Mayor, or maybe Mr. Benton or somebody. Is there a way to get that information?
Yeah, we could get that for you, but not right here on the spot.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, can somebody just get that to me via email? That'd be great, because that was just all my question out of those 2 proposals.
Sure, and I think the easiest thing is if you emailed me or any of us, we could forward that over to the budget people and they could get back. So if you don't mind doing that, that'd be the easiest way to do it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was all I wanted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Grundy Gomez, and we can ask Bethany to get your email as well if you hold the line. Mr. Mayor, there are no more callers. The floor is yours.
Okay, Mr. Blount.
Don't have a lot of comment about the numbers. I never was a numbers person. That capital improvements was the only class in planning curriculum I couldn't get an A in. But my comment is about standard operating procedure here that I comment on all the time, which is bringing in consultants. I will say at least this time, we didn't go all the way across the continent. We just went down to Oviedo, so at least that's in the same state. But you had people in GRU working on proposals, and if you needed more than that from outside GRU, I don't see what this organization did that Persons, Calderon, Simmons, Oshoba, some of those folks couldn't have done just as well. As far as how the citizens are impacted, for low and moderate income people, the so-called affordable homes they are in that pump out heat in cold weather and suck up hot weather in the summer, until that Bill of Rights is actually implemented and enforced, I don't see how folks like me, who are moderate income and kind of more toward low, and I don't know what's going to get my landlord to change out my 1974 aluminum frame single pane windows, other than a broad local government policy that sets a floor that all landlords can feel okay about achieving and not sticking their individual necks out. There was another ask. Excuse me. Can't remember the other point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who contributed and shared their thoughts with us on this. So staff, I think the request is as soon as you can get this data prepared for us, please put it on an agenda, whether that's general policy or city commission, whichever comes first. With that, Madam Clerk, we'll move to a vote.
Commissioner Sato?
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons?
Aye.
Commissioner Hayes Santos?
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward? Aye. And Mayor Poe?
Aye, motion passes unanimously. Thank you all again, everyone who contributed and participated in this for us. It was very helpful. I think we just need a few more details, and then to the great relief of staff, I will be in a place to make a decision and give you your marching orders moving forward for the budget. With that, our next item, Madam Clerk.
Next item is 200718, Advisory Board and Committee Annual Reports. And today you will hear a presentation from the CPB.
Okay, thank you. And I believe we have the chair of the plan board with us, Ms. Sutton. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I have a short presentation for you all that I worked with staff to put together. Brittany McMullen's also here with us to answer any questions. I'm going to run through that really quickly, and then I'm here to discuss other opportunities for us to work together between the Plan Board and you all. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, are you all seeing this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I'm going to walk through this pretty quickly. It's based on the questions that you sent out to all of the citizen boards. Why is it not going? Oops, sorry about that. So a quick activity overview and summary. We've been meeting regularly, as you all have, even through the pandemic this last year. So in 2020, we had 8 meetings and covered a total of 29 petitions. In 2019, we had 11 meetings and covered 40 different petitions. We work primarily with the Department of Sustainable Development and the planning staff. Some of the highlights are some of the Land Development Code updates that have come out of both recommendations from Plan Board members as well as you all, including accessory dwelling units, single room occupancy residences, excess parking and parking structures, single family tree mitigation, and the food truck parks. All of these items, we sort of serve as a vetting board for you all. So any text amendments to the code come through us first, get input and from the public as well as the board members, and then get recommended on to you all for final decisions. Here's just a list of some of the petition types that we saw. In most cases, we pass recommendations on to you all as the final decision makers. The one exception to that is special use permits. Special use permits, the Plan Board makes the final decision on those and determines whether people are getting permits for increased density, additional gas pumps, and things like that. So some of our goals for the coming year. Obviously, as you all know, we're in the middle of a comprehensive plan update. The Plan Board serves as the local planning agency, so all of those recommended changes, again, will come through us first. We'll have public hearings and get public input, as well as board member comments before we refer that on to you all for final decisions. And then we also will be working to continue the Land Development Code text updates that have been identified and prioritized by us through that joint meeting that we had a couple months ago. How can the Commission help us continue the annual funding for the board for things like training and going to the Florida Planning Conference? And then also, I think it's important, and I brought this up at our joint meeting, to focus on hiring a permanent director of the Department of Sustainable Development and also filling the vacant positions there to support all of the work that we're trying to do together. So that's all I have for today. I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss any individual items with you all.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Sutton. So far, out of our presentations, you have been the most concise. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's just
a lot on your agenda.
Yes, you do have a question or an observation or comment from Commissioner Johnson.
Sure.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I have a question about this board being the local planning agency. So the decisions or the recommendations are going to come to you all first. Do you all have any influence over the process besides it coming to you and then giving us a recommendation?
I guess maybe I want a little bit more background of what you're looking for. As far as the influence of the process, as far as staff reviewing it and bringing it to us and making the staff recommendation, no. It goes through the overall city process first that's defined by the code. We haven't revisited that since the last code update.
Okay, so you won't necessarily be working with our consultants or staff to provide recommendations. It sounds like that's something you will not be doing.
So they're working to schedule a special workshop with the comp plan team, and I believe that'll be coming up in April. We've been passing some dates around. So we will have some special workshops with them. And then we kind of, in my experience on the board, going through the Land Development Code update, we try to have focused discussions that allow the public to engage in a bigger way than sometimes the city commission has time for in your meetings, so that we can get all the public input at a plan board meeting for the consultant to then take back and work with as well.
Okay.
So we may go topic by topic. I'm not sure exactly what the plan is with the comp plan. I would imagine they're going to bring us pieces and parts to review, as opposed to waiting till the end and bringing, you know, the entire comp plan for discussion and a recommendation.
Yeah, thanks. Does somebody else want to speak to that in the Sustainable Development Office?
Hi, yes, this is Brittany McMullen. Can you all hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I think I would just agree with what Stephanie said. It's likely going to be that they bring, that the consultants bring pieces and parts to the plan board to work on together. So yeah, we're right now trying to set up our first joint meeting, well, not joint meeting, special meeting or workshop, I guess, whatever you want to call it, with the plan board and the consultants for April. So that'll be kind of our jumping off point for the plan board's involvement. And then I guess I don't really know the entire plan after that. I'm kind of just working on setting up that meeting right now, but I think it's going to be a series of those meetings.
Okay, and then the outcome of those meetings, like I'm wondering how that's going to influence what you bring forward to us. It doesn't sound like you know exactly what the plan is, and I get that because we're still, you know, early in this process. But I would appreciate knowing what your plan is for this board to involve, to give their input into the process and the plan.
Yeah, I think the general plan is to have a series of workshops, and for with the consultants and the board, and then the consultants will take back the feedback that they get and put it together with the feedback that they are also getting from staff, different departments in the city, and things like that. That's my understanding of the process now.
And I'm assuming these same workshops that you all are having with the community. So there's not necessarily outsized influence by this board. I'm wondering what weight is going to be given.
Gotcha.
So, Commissioner, if I can just jump in, there is a special meeting of the commission with the consultant, I believe, on March 31st.
Oh, yes.
Do a check-in on these types of issues, and that might be a better venue. We'll have everybody there.
Right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Sutton, there's no other lights or hands up. So if you would just please extend the commission's appreciation to the plan board. We know that out of all our boards, y'all put in some of the longest hours and have some of the more difficult decisions and contentious decisions. And so it's truly a labor of love for everybody that volunteers to serve on that. And all of that service is greatly appreciated by the commission and by our staff as well, you know, who works directly with you all. You know, we do have an amazing opportunity with this comp plan update. You know, everything that we know to this point is it's likely going to be unique for any comp plan, you know, even close to it in the country. The conversations I've had with our consultants have been really inspiring, and they're fully committed to this. And so, you know, I would encourage you even to, if you can, listen in and you know, sort of virtually participate with that March 31st meeting. And we'll encourage our other chairs as well to do that, just to really get an update of where we are and then how we can best leverage the great value that all of our boards have towards that process. So we'll look forward to that. But appreciate you being with us today. Thank you very much. And we'll let you go.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Okay, so up next we have member comment. Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed that the county had a meeting about COVID restrictions and maybe loosening things up, and I was hoping that we could have a letter from the commission to the mayor, to the county commission, asking they strongly consider and follow the federal guidelines from the CDC for COVID safety measures and removing any COVID safety measures. So I guess I would move that.
Happy to write it without objection. No objection. Yeah, that'd probably be more effective than me shouting at my TV screen. So I will be happy to write that letter. It was a difficult meeting to watch, and I happened to be on Facebook Live watching it, which means I was reading the comments as it happened as well, and that was especially troubling. Anybody else? Okay, good work. Our next general policy meeting will be April 8th, and so we'll look forward to seeing everybody there. And with that, we are adjourned.